made two of the greatest tennis players in history disappear, and nobody saw it coming. When a 21-year-old ranked 29 in the world stepped onto Wimbledon center court, nobody expected her name to end up bigger online than Djokovic and Serena Williams combined. But that is exactly what happened. Her highlight crossed 1.2 million views, more than double what either legend pulled in that same week. Stay with me until the end of this video, because the reason behind this is stranger, more emotional, and more reveal about how fame actually works online than you could ever imagine. And by the time we get to the final twist in her story, you'll understand why millions of people could not stop watching. Before we go further, if stories like this pull you in, the kind where an underdog does something the whole world said was impossible, do yourself a favor and subscribe right now. Not because I'm asking you to, but because this channel exists to find these moments before they blow up everywhere else. And if you're someone who loves being early to a story instead of hearing about it after everyone else already knows, this is exactly the kind of place you want to be. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into what actually happened that week at Wimbledon, because it is bigger than tennis. Let's rewind. Before her breakout at the Miami tournament in 2025, this young woman was sitting around number 140 in the world rankings. If you know anything about professional sport, you know that number is a strange, almost cruel place to exist. You're close enough to taste the top. You're good enough to occasionally frighten a ranked player. But to the casual fan, you don't exist yet. Nobody searches your name. Nobody puts you on a poster. You are invisible to the world, even while you are quietly getting dangerous. Then Miami happened. She beat opponents nobody expected her to beat. And suddenly, tennis insiders started whispering that this wasn't a fluke. This was a real talent finally waking up. But here's the thing about one big win. It doesn't answer the real question. It just creates a bigger one. Can she do it again? Can she do it on the biggest stage in the sport? That question followed her all the way into Wimbledon, and Wimbledon does not forgive. Picture the moment. Center court, grass beneath her feet. Across the net stands a defending Wimbledon champion, a 6-time Grand Slam winner who has broken the will of far more experienced players than her. This is where dreams usually die quietly. The stage is too big, the crowd too loud, the opponent too proven. Almost every young player who reaches this point tightens up and fades. And for a moment, it looked like that same story might repeat itself, because the pressure didn't creep in slowly. It hit immediately in the very first set. And this is where you need to lean in, because what happened next is the kind of tennis sequence that makes an entire stadium forget to breathe. 11-9. 2 championship-level set points saved. A proven champion pushing from one side of the net, and a 21-year-old refusing, absolutely refusing, to blink. Every single point in that tiebreak was a small war. Every save felt like it shouldn't have been possible. And if you've ever watched a moment like this live, you know exactly the feeling I'm talking about, that sense that you cannot look away because something is about to break one way or the other. She won that tiebreak. And the number matters, not because it looked pretty on a scoreboard, but because of what it proved. She didn't win by hoping the champion would collapse. She won by attacking. She won by trusting her own instincts in the most dangerous moment of her career. That is not luck. That is nerve. Now here's where most young athletes lose it. They win the emotional set. They feel the upset coming into view, and their mind jumps ahead to the headlines before the match is even finished. She did the opposite. She kept her foot down. She played clean, focused tennis and closed out the second set 6-2. Just like that, the defending champion was out, and a young woman from the Philippines had punched her way into the 4th round of Wimbledon. Now on its own, that result should have been enough to dominate tennis headlines for a day. But it does not explain why this clip traveled far beyond the tennis world into places tennis almost never reaches. And here's the part one really want you to pay attention to, because it changes how you'll see every viral video from now on. Getting watched and getting shared are two completely different things. Clicking is curiosity. Sharing is emotion. And she had both. The tiebreak made people click. What she said afterward is what made people share. Because when the camera is turned to her after the biggest win of her life, she didn't talk about ranking points. She didn't talk about prize money or strategy. She went somewhere far more personal. She talked about being a little girl in the Philippines, ruffled socks, Light-up shoes, chubby cheeks, training after school with her brother and her grandfather beside her. And in that instant, the story stopped being about tennis and became something almost everyone on earth understands. The feeling of a dream that started small in a backyard with almost nothing. That is the kind of moment a parent sends to their child. That's the kind of moment a young athlete sends to a friend who's struggling to believe in themselves. That's the kind of moment a Filipino fan sends to an entire family group chat. You didn't need to understand tennis rankings to feel it. You just needed to have once been a kid with a dream too big for your surroundings. And that is exactly the difference between her and the legends she was compared to. When a legend wins, people are impressed but rarely surprised because they already know the size of that story. She was different. She was new. She was carrying an entire country that almost never gets a moment like this on the world stage. And then she delivered it. That combination, an unknown underdog plus an unforgettable human story, created something raw fame alone cannot manufacture. Shock, urgency, the unmistakable feeling that you were watching history begin in real time. And speaking of history, this is where the story gets even bigger. So stick with me, because there's a twist coming that explains why this moment might not even be the biggest one she creates. For the Philippines, reaching the fourth round of Grand Slam wasn't just personal progress. It was a national first. And first behave completely differently online than ordinary highlights do. A first gives an entire country permission to celebrate together. A first makes people tag every person they know. A first turns a simple highlight into a shared national event, something legends with 20 or more Grand Slam titles simply cannot recreate anymore. Not because they're any less great, but because their greatness has already been celebrated 100 times before. So let's be completely clear about what actually happened here, because it matters far beyond one match. This wasn't proof that she is more famous than two of the greatest players who have ever lived. She isn't, not even close. It was proof that in that exact moment, her story was more urgent. Fame gets attention. Novelty gets curiosity. Emotion gets shared. National history gives people a reason to gather. She had all four at once, stacked on top of each other. And that stack is what sent the numbers soaring past two icons of the sport. And here's something that should genuinely change how you look at every viral video you scroll past from now on. A massive view count doesn't just tell you who is famous. It tells you what people felt was urgent enough to pass along to someone else. Some videos get watched simply because everyone already knows a name. Others explode because people feel like they've discovered something before the rest of the world caught on. And that feeling, being early, being part of the first wave, is one of the most powerful emotional triggers on the entire internet. Now, if this story has hooked you so far, this next part is exactly why you need to be subscribed before you close this video. Because what happens after this moment is where things get genuinely uncertain, and I don't want you to miss it. This single viral highlight is just a moment, but moments like this can either fade into nothing, or they can become the start of a pattern that changes an athlete's entire career. She is now heading into the North American hardcourt swing, with Washington, D.C. and the conversation around the U.S. Open sitting right in front of her. And that is an entirely different battlefield. American audiences don't carry the same emotional history that Filipino fans do. Some of them will only know her from this one Wimbledon clip. Some will only know she beat a defending champion and nothing more. She is about to meet an entirely new audience for the very first time, an audience that has no built-in reason to root for her yet. So here's the real suspense heading into the rest of the story. Can lightning strike twice? Can she create another moment that stops millions of people mid-scroll when the crowd doesn't already know her name? Can that same raw emotion survive outside the exact magic of center court at Wimbledon? Or was this a once-in-a-career spark that fades the moment the spotlight moves somewhere else? Because here's the truth almost nobody talks about. Moments like this don't just build view counts. They build entire audiences from scratch. They take a player from being known only inside serious tennis circles to being recognized by casual sports fans who've never watched a full match in their life. They make people search her name before her next tournament even begins. And that is exactly why this single clip was never just a highlight. It was a doorway. And once someone walks through that doorway and meets her story for the very first time,